1 million meals per month. That's what Fred Harvey's restaurant chain served American soldiers in 1943. But Hollywood sold you a prettier story. Judy Garland sang about civilizing the West with good manners and apple pie. The real Harvey Girls signed contracts that withheld half their wages if they married. They weren't angels sent to tame the frontier. They were America's first fast food workforce, trained to serve a 4-course meal in 20 minutes while trains refueled. And the system that made it possible. A telegraph network that turned eating into assembly line efficiency 50 years before McDonald's existed. The myth says Fred Harvey brought civilization to the Wild West. The court records tell a different story. In Newton, Kansas, the local newspaper called him one of the worst monopolists in the state because he imported supplies from back east instead of buying local. In Las Vegas, New Mexico, town officials fought to stop him from controlling the meat supply. When Harvey set up shop in Albuquerque, residents complained about his prices and the 2 yellow boxcars he painted as a makeshift restaurant. This wasn't a benevolent civilizer. This was vertical integration wrapped in Irish linens. But here's what the critics missed. Before Fred Harvey, eating on a westbound train meant gambling with your stomach and your schedule. Roadhouses near water stops served rancid meat, week-old coffee, and biscuits hard enough to crack teeth. You paid in advance, rushed through your meal in 20 minutes, and if the train left early, you lost your money and your dinner. Those leftover meals, sold to the next batch of passengers. It was legalized food poisoning with a side of robbery. January 1876. Second floor of the Santa Fe Depot in Topeka, Kansas. 41-year-old Fred Harvey stood in an empty lunchroom, freshly fired from his railroad job and betting everything on a handshake deal. No contract, no lawyers. Just Charles Morse, superintendent of the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway, agreeing to let Harvey run one restaurant. Harvey ordered new everything: Irish linens from Dublin, Belgian crystal, English silver, china plates thick enough to survive a railroad kitchen. The local newspaper thought he was insane. A typical railroad breakfast cost 15 cents and came on tin plates. Harvey charged 35 cents. And served it on heated china with real silverware. Steak with eggs, hashed brown potatoes, 6 pancakes the size of dinner plates, dripping with real maple syrup. Apple pie for dessert. Coffee brewed fresh. All for 35 cents. Passengers who'd been choking down beans and hardtack couldn't believe it. Within months, travelers were planning their entire routes to eat in Topeka. The Santa Fe noticed. Their ridership numbers jumped. In 1878, they gave Harvey a formal contract, no rent, free transport for all his supplies on refrigerated rail cars. In exchange, Harvey would open restaurants at every major stop heading west. By 1883, Harvey operated 17 eating houses from Kansas to New Mexico. But he had a problem. His all-male waitstaff was as wild as the territory they served. They drank, they brawled, they showed up late or not at all. In Rayton, New Mexico, things came to a head. A knife fight erupted between patrons and waiters after a drunk shift. Fred Harvey arrived the next morning, fired everyone except the cooks, and handed the reins to his lieutenant Tom Gable. Gable agreed on one condition: replace every waiter with waitresses. Harvey hesitated. Female servers in 1883 had a reputation. They worked in saloons and brothels, not family restaurants. But Gable convinced him to try it. Harvey placed ads in Eastern newspapers. Wanted, young women, 18 to 30 years of age, of good moral character, attractive and intelligent, as waitresses in Harvey eating houses on the Santa Fe Railroad in the West. Wages $17.50 per month with room and board. Liberal tips customary. Experience not necessary. $17.50 a month. That's what changed everything. In 1883, a factory girl in Boston made $8 a month. A school teacher in Philadelphia earned $12. The Harvey Girl wage wasn't just competitive, it was transformative. And Harvey threw in room, board, uniforms, laundry service, and a free train ticket anywhere on the Santa Fe line once a year. For young women trapped in tenement apartments or dying small-town farms, this was escape velocity. But there was a catch. Sign a 6-month contract, remain unmarried for the duration, or forfeit half your base pay. Live in company dormitories under the supervision of a head waitress who enforced 10 o'clock curfews and chaperoned all male visitors. Attend etiquette training for 2 weeks before your first shift. Wear the uniform exactly as specified. Black dress hanging 8 inches from the floor, starched white apron, white ribbon in your hair, black stockings, black shoes. No makeup, no jewelry, no exceptions. Over 100,000 women said yes. They came from Chicago, New York, Boston, and Philadelphia. Farm girls from Iowa and Kansas. Daughters of railroad men and shopkeepers. Most had finished 8th grade. Some had high school diplomas. They weren't desperate. They were ambitious. The Harvey Girl application process rejected 2 out of every 3 candidates. If you made it through, you joined what became the most recognizable wait staff in American history. The training was military. 2 weeks of drilling on table settings, drink codes, and the Harvey way. A Harvey Girl needed to memorize which fork went where on 7 different place settings. Oyster fork positioned differently from salad fork. Soup spoon versus dessert spoon. Butter knife angle relative to bread plate. Wine glass placement for different varietals. This wasn't arbitrary. This was theater. Harvey wanted passengers to feel like they'd stepped into a fine New York restaurant, not a depot lunchroom, in the middle of Kansas prairie. She learned the cup code, how to position a cup on its saucer to signal what drink the customer wanted. Cup upside down meant hot tea. Right side up meant coffee. Tilted in the saucer meant iced tea. Handle pointing toward the customer meant milk. Each position saved 5 to 10 seconds of verbal communication. Multiply that across 300 customers and you saved 25 minutes. That was the difference between making the schedule and falling behind. The second girl in the pair would follow behind, pouring the correct beverage without saying a word. 20 seconds per table. No mistakes. Training also covered what to do when things went wrong. A drunk customer. A customer who couldn't pay. A customer making inappropriate advances. The Harvey Girls had protocols for everything. Drunk customer, signal the manager with a specific hand gesture. Broke customer, quietly offer a smaller meal at lower price. Inappropriate customer, move to a different section and let the head waitress handle it. The system anticipated every variable and had a response ready. The system had to be perfect because the math was brutal. A Santa Fe passenger train arrived every 4 hours. It carried 200 to 300 people. The train stopped for 30 minutes to refuel and take on water. Passengers got 20 to 25 minutes to eat. That meant a Harvey house had to serve a complete 4-course meal to 300 people in under half an hour. Impossible, unless you engineered every second. Here's how they did it. About an hour before the train arrived, the conductor walked through the passenger cars with a simple question: dining room or lunch counter? The dining room meant a full meal, 60 cents in the early years, $1 by 1918. The lunch counter meant quick sandwiches and coffee at lower prices. The conductor counted heads and telegraphed the numbers ahead to the next Harvey house. 1 stop before arrival, roughly 50 miles out, the kitchen got the message. 200 diners, 150 for the dining room, 50 for the counter. The cooks started working. The menu was limited by design. 2 main courses, same side dishes. This wasn't about choice. It was about speed. When passengers chose at the table, it slowed everything down. Harvey eliminated that variable. Steak or chicken. Both came with potatoes, vegetables, bread, and pie. The pies were cut into quarters, not sixths like every other restaurant in America. Harvey wanted value. When the train pulled in, the meals were already plated and waiting, but the passengers didn't know that yet. They climbed off the train, stiff from wooden seats and thick with coal smoke. A Harvey employee stood at the entrance with a brass gong. He struck it hard. The sound carried across the platform, louder than the steam hissing from the locomotive. Passengers knew exactly where to go. Inside, the Harvey Girls were positioned, tables set with precision. Water glasses filled, napkins folded. The first course, usually soup or salad, was already on the table. Passengers sat. The Harvey Girls moved in pairs. First girl took drink orders using the cup code. Second girl poured. No words exchanged. 30 seconds later, coffee and tea were served. The main course arrived within 5 minutes, hot, perfectly plated. The Harvey Girls cleared each course and brought the next without asking. Timing was everything. Finish your steak in 12 minutes. You got pie and coffee. Linger too long, you risked missing the train. And everyone made the train. In the entire history of the Harvey House system, no documented case exists of a passenger being left behind because of slow service. That's not an accident. That's industrial design applied to hospitality. Harvey borrowed from factory efficiency experts, from railroad scheduling systems, from military logistics. He turned eating into a process that could be measured, refined, and replicated across 800 miles of desert. By 1888, there was a Harvey House every 100 miles along the Santa Fe line. That's the distance a steam locomotive could travel before needing water and coal. The railroad and the restaurant chain evolved together. Santa Fe built the stations. Harvey built the dining rooms. The railroad provided free refrigerated cars to transport fresh produce, meat, and dairy from California, Kansas City, and Chicago. Harvey maintained 2 dairy facilities, the largest in Las Vegas, New Mexico, to guarantee fresh milk in a region where alkali water poisoned most wells. The partnership was so tight that Santa Fe advertising featured Harvey as prominently as the trains themselves. Meals by Fred Harvey. All the way became the railroad slogan, and it worked. Passengers chose Santa Fe over competing lines specifically because of the food. This wasn't incidental to the railroad's success. This was core strategy. Good food meant more ticket sale. More ticket sales meant more revenue. Everyone won. Except the local restaurants Harvey put out of business, which brings us back to those angry editorials. In Newton, Kansas, shop owners watched Harvey's supply trains roll in from Kansas City loaded with beef, produce, and coffee. None of it bought locally. In Las Vegas, New Mexico, the town fought Harvey's application to operate his own slaughterhouse. They wanted him to buy from local ranchers. Harvey refused. He didn't trust the quality. He'd rather ship beef 800 miles than serve a steak that wasn't perfect. The locals called it monopoly. Harvey called it standards, and the standards were obsessive. Fresh coffee every 2 hours, no exceptions. If the brew sat longer than 120 minutes, dump it and start over. Linens washed daily. Silver polished until it reflected like mirrors. China replaced at the first chip or crack. Harvey himself traveled the line constantly, dropping into restaurants unannounced. Employees told stories of him overturning an entire table if the settings were wrong. He'd fire a chef for serving day-old bread. He'd dock a manager's pay for dust on a windowsill. This wasn't kindness. This was branding before anyone called it that. Harvey understood something that wouldn't become common business wisdom for another 50 years. Consistency builds trust. A passenger eating at the Harvey House in Dodge City, Kansas, needed to get the same meal, same quality, same service as the Harvey House in Needles, California. If one location failed, it damaged the entire system, so Harvey eliminated variation through ruthless enforcement. The Harvey Girls bore the brunt of it. They worked 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. No sitting between trains. If there were no customers, They cleaned, they polished silver, folded napkins, swept floors, washed windows. The head waitress watched everything. Break curfew, you got fined. Show up with wrinkled apron, you got sent home to change. Flirt with customers, you got a warning. Second offense meant termination and forfeiture of wages owed. But here's what the historians often miss. The women kept coming. Applications flooded Harvey's Kansas City headquarters. At peak operation between 1900 and 1920, Harvey employed approximately 5,000 people at any given time. Roughly 3,000 were Harvey Girls. They stayed an average of 18 months. Some worked for decades. The ones who left early usually left for marriage, which meant they lost half their accumulated pay. The ones who stayed accumulated savings most working women could never imagine. A Harvey girl making $17.50 per month with no expenses could save $200 a year. In 1890, that was enough to buy a small house in a frontier town. It was enough to send money home to support parents or siblings. It was enough to fund a future that didn't depend on a husband. And for the women who did marry, they married on their terms. Harvey Girls had a reputation. They were educated, well-mannered, financially independent, and extremely selective. Will Rogers famously said Fred Harvey kept the West in food and wives. The joke had truth in it. An estimated 20,000 Harvey Girls married men they met through their work. But they didn't marry the first cowboy who smiled at them. They had options. Consider Ruby Douglas Kuntz, a former Harvey girl interviewed by historian Judy Morris. Kuntz described how Harvey girls expected to be treated with respect. They had money. They had mobility. They could leave any time they wanted. Suitors knew this. So the men who courted Harvey girls brought flowers, minded their language, and asked permission to call. This wasn't the Wild West of legend where women were scarce commodities. This was a labor market where skilled workers had leverage. And make no mistake, Harvey Girls were skilled workers. After 2 weeks of training, they could serve a 4-course meal to 300 people in 20 minutes. They could identify regular customers and remember preferences. They could diffuse conflicts between drunk miners and tired salesmen. They could calculate tips in their heads, make change from multiple currencies, and spot a dine and dash from across the room. These weren't simpering angels civilizing rough men. These were professionals executing a highly choreographed performance under intense time pressure. When dining cars became standard on passenger trains in the 1890s, Santa Fe gave Harvey exclusive contracts to staff them. Harvey dining cars could feed an entire train in 30 minutes while moving at 40 miles per hour. The kitchens were 6 feet wide. The staff worked in teams of 8 to 12. A chef, prep cooks, dishwashers, and Harvey girls in constant motion, timing their movements to the sway of the train. Serving soup from a tureen while the car pitched through mountain curves required skill most people couldn't imagine. By 1899, when Harvey signed his final contract with Santa Fe, his empire stretched across 12 states, 15 hotels, 47 restaurants, 30 dining cars. He'd created America's first restaurant chain, its first hotel chain, and arguably its first branded hospitality company. The Fred Harvey name meant something. It meant clean. It meant reliable. It meant you could eat a steak in Albuquerque that tasted exactly like the steak you ate in Topeka 6 months ago. Harvey died in 1901 from colon cancer. He was 66. His sons Byron and Ford took over the company and expanded it. They opened El Tovar Hotel at the Grand Canyon in 1905, a 4-star resort perched on the rim. They hired architect Mary Coulter to design properties that defined Southwestern style. They launched Indian Detours in 1926, using chauffeur-driven Harvey cars to take tourists into Native American settlements. They sold Native American jewelry, pottery, and textiles in Harvey House gift shops, creating one of the first large-scale markets for indigenous art. World War II brought the Harvey houses back from decline. Passenger rail traffic surged as soldiers moved across the country on troop trains. In 1943, the Fred Harvey Company served more than 1 million meals per month. Dormitories that had been half empty in the 1930s filled with new Harvey Girls. The women worked double shifts, serving 3,000 soldiers a day at some locations. Many of the soldiers were 19, 20 years old, heading to war. The Harvey Girls fed them hot meals and kind words. For a lot of those young men, it was the last decent food they'd eat for years. The work during the war years was different. These weren't leisure travelers ordering steak and discussing business. These were scared kids in uniform, most of whom had never been more than 50 miles from their hometowns. The Harvey Girls became something between waitresses and surrogate sisters. They wrote down addresses so soldiers could mail letters from overseas. They helped boys figure out how to use a telephone to call home before shipping out. They smiled and made small talk and pretended everything was normal while serving breakfast to a dining room full of teenagers heading to Europe or the Pacific. The company tried to maintain standards, but rationing made it impossible. Fresh coffee every 2 hours gave way to extended brew times. Steaks got smaller, the menu simplified even further. But Harvey management understood what mattered. The service stayed fast. The china stayed clean. The Harvey Girls stayed professional. That consistency meant something to soldiers who'd just been ripped out of ordinary life and thrust into military discipline. For 30 minutes, sitting in a Harvey House dining room, they could pretend they were just travelers on a regular train trip. But the war only delayed the inevitable. Passenger rail declined sharply in the 1950s as highways and airlines took over. Harvey houses that had served 8 trains a day dropped to 2, then 1, then none. Most closed by 1948. The company pivoted to highway rest stops and airport restaurants. In 1945, total revenue across all Harvey operations hit $37 million. By 1968, when the company was sold to AmFac Incorporated, it was the 6th largest food retailer in the United States. Not bad for a system built on 30-minute meal stops. So what's the real story of the Harvey Girls? Not the Judy Garland version, where wholesome Midwestern girls bring culture to grateful cowboys. The real version is more interesting. These were women who saw a chance to escape limited options and took it, even though the contract was exploitative and the work was brutal. They weren't civilizing the West. They were participating in the industrialization of hospitality. They were the waitstaff equivalent of assembly line workers, trained to perform repetitive tasks at a maximum efficiency. And they did it so well that the system became a model for every chain restaurant that followed. Fred Harvey didn't invent fast food, but he invented the systems that made fast food possible. Standardized menus, centralized supply chains, employee training programs, quality control inspections, brand consistency across multiple locations. These concepts seem obvious now. In 1876, they were revolutionary. McDonald's founders Ray Kroc studied the Harvey House model when building his empire. So did Howard Johnson. So did every hospitality company that figured out how to scale service without losing quality. The Harvey Girls weren't just waitresses. They were the proof of concept. They demonstrated that you could train workers to deliver consistent service at high volume without sacrificing standards. They showed that women could perform this work better than men, despite an entire culture that said otherwise. And they proved that even in the wildest parts of the West, there was demand for something better than beans and bad coffee. The myth says the Harvey Girls civilized the frontier. The truth is they served meals. They served them fast, they served them well, and they got paid less than they deserved for doing it. Some married cowboys, some saved their money and went home, some worked for 40 years and retired with pensions. All of them participated in building an industrial food system that transformed how Americans ate when they traveled. That's not romantic, but it's real. By 1957, the last traditional Harvey House closed. La Posada in Winslow, Arizona, had been Mary Coulter's masterpiece when it opened in 1930. 27 years later, it shut its doors as passenger rail service dwindled to nothing. The building became railroad offices. The dining rooms sat empty. The Harvey Girl dormitories collected dust. In 1997, a couple bought the property and restored it as a hotel. Today, you can stay in the same rooms where Harvey Girls slept between shifts. You can eat in the same dining room where they served 300 people in 20 minutes. The gong still hangs in the lobby. Elsewhere, the Harvey legacy lives on in fragments. El Tovar still operates at the Grand Canyon, now run by Xanterra, the company that bought the Fred Harvey properties from Amfac. La Fonda on the plaza in Santa Fe remains open. The Casa del Desierto in Barstow is a museum. Most of the rest are gone, demolished or abandoned. A few towns kept the buildings and turned them into libraries, city halls, antique shops. In Belen, New Mexico, the old Harvey House is now a railroad museum. The china is on display behind glass. The uniforms hang on mannequins. The menus are laminated and mounted on walls. And somewhere in those museums, if you look carefully, you'll find the numbers that matter. 100,000 women employed, 20,000 marriages, 1 million meals per month in 1943, $37 million in revenue by 1945. These aren't statistics about civilization or culture or femininity. They're statistics about labor, logistics, and industrial capitalism applied to hospitality. The Harvey Girls didn't civilize the West. They fed it. They fed it fast, they fed it well, and they built the blueprint for every chain restaurant you've ever eaten in. Fred Harvey died in 1901 worth approximately $3 million. His company operated for 92 years, employed hundreds of thousands of people, and served tens of millions of meals. At its peak, a Harvey House existed within 2 hours of anywhere on the Santa Fe line from Chicago to Los Angeles. And it all started with a handshake deal and a crazy idea that passengers deserved better than rancid stew and week-old coffee. The movies showed you Judy Garland singing about the Atchison, Topeka, and the Santa Fe. History shows you immigrant labor, telegraph networks, and assembly line efficiency wrapped in Irish linen. One version is more comfortable. The other version is true. The Harvey Girls were America's first fast food workforce, operating 50 years. Before the term existed, they weren't angels. They were professionals, and they changed how America ate, one 30-minute meal at a time.